everyone. We we are going to be recording this session. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. For anyone I've yet to meet, my name is Deirdre Schreiber, and I'm the Associate Director of Learning and Development in Hewitt, and also run the IT Academy. So this is a series we've started just last year and plan to continue, but bringing more learning opportunities throughout the year through these tech talks. So very excited today to be joined by Jefferson Burson, who is our Senior Director of Enterprise Architecture in Hewitt, and Dave Laporte, who is our Senior Director of Integration and Innovation. And really the people who are behind the AI Sandbox and a lot of support and help with the AI tools that I know everyone is interested in learning more about. So they're here to talk to you about, how you can work smarter using either the ChatGPT EDU or the AI Sandbox effectively. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Jefferson, and Dave.
Great. Thank you very much. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So we'll be approaching this afternoon's session in two ways. We have some slides that we prepared that'll provide some overview and context to both the AI Sandbox as well as to ChatGPT Edu. And we'll also provide a brief demo of both of those AI applications. I'll demo Sandbox and then Dave will demo ChatGPT. I know we have a wide variety of folks here in this afternoon's call, so we're going to start out assuming that you may not be that familiar with the Sandbox or ChatGPT. So we're not going to assume that you're a power user who already knows everything about it. This is going to be an introduction to both tools. So let me start some screen sharing here and we'll get started. Okay, can everyone see my screen okay? Okay, great. I'm sharing my whole desktop because I'm going to switch back and forth between the presentation and the demo. Is there already a question from Minakshi? Okay.
Sorry,
Okay.
that was I was trying to give you a thumbs up that I can see this.
Got it. Okay, sounds good. So we're going to talk a little bit about guidance overall for both applications and talk briefly about data security. Then we'll talk about each of the two applications, provide some demos and some examples of working with content. So first, we have two primary AI chat applications here in Harvard. The first is the AI Sandbox, which Harvard University IT, leveraging open source software, has deployed and made available to the Harvard community at large. Most of the schools and central administration have access to the Sandbox, and it provides a lot of nice features to it. I'm not going to walk through the whole matrix, but the main thing I would talk about with the Sandbox is it's currently funded by central administration for university use. We don't do per user licensing or cost allocations at this time. And also it has a fantastic feature where it can use more than one AI large language model. If you want to work with ChatGPT, you can. If you prefer working with Claude or Gemini, you can select those AI models and use it all within the Sandbox fairly cleanly and fairly easily. Then also for Faculty of Arts and Sciences and HBS and some CADM users, we also have ChatGPT Edu. And although it's focused exclusively on OpenAI's large language models, it provides a great set of features around chat, working with files, image generation, and some nice custom GPT features. And we'll talk more about those momentarily. And again, I won't walk through all the features here. There's a lot of content. One of the main things I wanted to set the context for using either of these AI applications is to be sure that as you're using them, that you're taking into account university guidance around using generative AI tools. And it's the same principles we use for other IT systems and applications are also applicable to generative AI. So we want to make sure that everyone is doing their best to protect confidential data. They're reviewing content before publication. We're adhering to existing information security and academic policies. that were alert for phishing. Generative AI can now be used for phishing attacks, for example. And if you need to acquire a new tool for some reason that you connect with Hewitt before purchasing something. Uh, for both the Sandbox and for ChatGPT Education, both are cleared for data classification level 3. That it's that medium risk of confidential information. So it's like business need to know, but not necessarily including PII or personal information or HIPAA data or credit cards or anything like that. Neither tool is cleared for that level 4 or higher level of data. So it's a I think that's the main context I want to make sure everyone's aware for both tools. We've done a lot of work with OpenAI and ChatGPT to make sure that we can do data classification 3 there, and same thing with the Sandbox. Even though the Sandbox uses multiple providers, all of those providers are implemented in the Sandbox to do level 3 data handling. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Sandbox. So at this point, I'm going to walk over to a demo of what it looks like. Can everyone see this okay? I'm going to try to make it bigger for, how's that? Okay, so when you first log into the Sandbox with Harvard Key, this is what the basic interface looks like. You've got a chat window where you can ask questions, you pose questions, you get responses. As I mentioned earlier, one of the neat innovations behind the Sandbox is the fact that you can select different models. So by default, we have OpenAI GPT-4.1 as the default model that you can work with. And what's actually kind of cool is we got GPT-4.1 to the Sandbox faster than the ChatGPT desktop application did for Edu. So it's a nice feature to be able to have larger context size, 1 million tokens, and a good knowledge cutoff of June of last year. But to select different models, you just click on this upper left OpenAI button. This is what we sometimes call the model picker. And you have all these different options for LLMs, which stands for large language model. You could select other OpenAI models like O4 Mini, GPT-401 Mini, or O3 for advanced reasoning. But you can also select other providers like Claude, Anthropic's Claude 3.5 Haiku, or Claude 4 Sonnet. Meta's Llama is available, as well as Google Gemini. And I'll talk more about the code interpreter and the image generator later. But this is how you select different models within the Sandbox. We default to GPT-4.1, and I think for most people, for most use cases, it's a great way to get started. So it's a fairly standard. Tell me about Harvard University. I'll just do a basic demo here. You pose a question, you get a response back. And this is based upon GPT-4.1's knowledge. It's whatever it's been trained to know. This is how it provides answers by default. So, but what's neat about this is, and one of the cool things about the model picker is in the middle of a conversation, you don't have to stick with the first model that you started with. So we started with GPT-4.1, but now I'm going to switch to something completely different. I'll switch to Google Gemini. Actually, I'll switch to Anthropic. Claude 4. And so now I'll say, tell me what graduate schools are at Harvard. Graduate schools are available. So notice I'm not saying Harvard. I'm just saying, tell me what graduate schools are available. It picked up the fact that my first question was about Harvard University. So the answer is still based upon my first question about Harvard University, even though I switched the LLM model. I switched from GPT-4.1 to Claude. It picked up right where I left off with the first model and answered my second question based upon what it knew from the first one. So this is what's sometimes referred to as context. It had context from the first question and the first answer, and it brought that context to the second question, even though I switched the model providers. So, and context can not just be questions and answers, but it can also be files. So I can attach files. So I've got this Sandbox roadmap that I'll upload right now. And I'll ask a question of the content. Tell me a roadmap feature. So this is actually about the Sandbox. And it's going to answer this question based upon the file that I just uploaded. And this is a common feature in the Sandbox and in ChatGPT. There's nothing unique here, but file uploads are an important way to provide additional information to an AI application and then get interesting responses based upon the information you provide. So I got a set of coming soon features from the roadmap of the document that I just uploaded. And meanwhile, files aren't just what I upload here. The Sandbox also has this cool file manager down here where I can select prior files that have been uploaded previously. I can go back in time and view them. So I've got files I've uploaded from other demos, answers that I've gotten from other demos, but I can also manage files. So if you need to get rid of old stuff, like these are a bunch of responses I got from prior demos, I could delete them, or I could go through back in my history and select old files and use them in my questions. So this provides for a nice, robust way to not only work with files now, but also to continue working with files that you've used in the past. Now, the file manager over here on the right is not the only feature in the sandbox. We also have this thing called prompts or prompt library. And what's important about the prompt library is that sometimes working with these generative AI applications, you have questions that you use over and over again. And I'll show you a couple of examples of that. And so the prompt library allows you to store an old question and reuse it. So just as a simple example, I'll ask, what LLM are you based on? It's a silly question, but actually it's important for testing when we roll out new releases of the sandbox. I clicked on the prompt. It automatically added the question to the text box. And then at that point, I hit enter and it provides an answer to it. And I've got a wide variety of prompts here, some of which allow you to make multiple choice questions or actually to type in additional pieces of information. So for example, I have a prompt library that it requires me to enter an answer. What was the establishment date for a university? I'm going to say Harvard. I'll type it in, submit it, and pose the question to the sandbox. So prompts allow for pretty flexible but pretty useful ways to reuse questions that you might want to go back to the sandbox over and over again over time. You might imagine creating weekly summaries of meeting notes or business reports or extracting information from spreadsheets. Sometimes those prompts and those questions you pose, you want to reuse over and over again. So that's the prompt library. Another neat thing I want to show you while we're looking at the prompt library is if you're using one of the neat things about the sandbox is it's not just questions and answers. You can actually use the sandbox and ChatGPT to create code for you. You might need to create an automation script or an Excel macro or even create an HTML page. And it's very good at creating code. It's very good at creating software. And there's even this feature within the sandbox called an artifact, which allows you to see a prototype or an early version of something that you had created. So I have a prompt here that says, create an HTML page with a dark crimson background and blinking text that says, hello, IT Academy, since that's what we're meeting here today for. So I use the prompt. I'm going to enter it now. And as you can see on the right, it created this window on the right that shows me the code that was just created, and I can preview it and make sure it actually looks okay. So we have the red background, the blinking text, and we can preview and see very quickly an early example of the code that was created on my behalf. And I can even modify it in real time. Hello, IT Academy, Wednesday afternoon. So I'm updating the HTML code right now. I go back to the preview, and it automatically takes into account the change that's been made to the artifact. So this is artifacts. It's a nice way to preview and prototype quickly certain pieces of code or HTML that you have the sandbox create on your behalf. Another feature I'd like to show in the sandbox is temporary chat. As you can see here on the left, the sandbox maintains a chat history of prior sessions, old examples of creating HTML pages or sustainability reports. But sometimes you may want to ask a question that you don't want to necessarily get saved in the chat history. Maybe it's, for whatever reason, maybe it's a sensitive question or it's something that you don't care about and you won't ever want to go back to. So for these temporary chats, you just click on this upper right button up here called temporary chat. It changes the color of the window, and then you can ask questions that will not show up in history. I'll say, what is a good career change for me? I don't want Dave to know I'm considering a career change, so I'm going to put it in a temporary chat. So it answers my question, but as you'll see here on the left, it did not add anything to my chat history. So it allows for a temporary or perhaps a slightly more confidential chat that you can work with and get answers to. The last one or two features I'd like to show you before we move on with the agenda are a couple of other more advanced features in the sandbox. So I'm going to go back to the model picker here, scroll down to the bottom, and we can create images using Dolly. And there are more advanced image creation features that are available in ChatGPT, and Dave's going to show that to you in a moment. But Sandbox has them as well with Dolly. So I'll say create an image of students in a classroom at Harvard. I saw an error message. Hopefully, it's actually working today. So unfortunately, we have an error with our image creator right now. So I won't be able to demo that for you today, but that's actually in a way okay because we have much better image generation abilities in ChatGPT, and Dave's going to be showing it to you momentarily. The last feature I'd like to show you is the code interpreter. So yeah, as we saw a moment ago with the sandbox can create code for you, but it doesn't necessarily run it. And that's an important distinction. Normally, if I had ChatGPT create code for me, I would have to cut and paste it and put it into an IDE or a program that can actually run that code. But for certain things, the code interpreter can not only create the code for you, but can actually run it for you as well. So let me show you when that does not work. So I'm going to use GPT-4.1. And I'm going to say calculate pi to the 1,000th digit and provide a graph of that. And this is not code interpreter. This is the regular GPT-4.1. And it creates this image, but it didn't actually calculate pi for me. And it didn't actually even create the image. It pulled from memory old questions about pi and old answers to pi, and it just provided the answer from its memory, but didn't actually calculate it. And it didn't even create the graph for me either. Um, so that's where the large language model is pulling from memory rather than actually doing a calculation. But if I were to use the code interpreter, it will actually create an algorithm to calculate pi on my behalf and then create the graph. And it will do that on the server rather than me requiring it to open up a Python program or something and run it locally. So the code interpreter is receiving the request. It actually shows you that's creating the Python code to do the calculation. It runs the calculation, and then it creates the graph for me. Now, ChatGPT can create graphs for you, but it's not necessarily able to run the actual calculations on your behalf. And that's one of the neat things that Code Interpreter can do for us. There are much more advanced use cases for Code Interpreter, but I at least wanted to provide a basic demo and a basic insight into how it works in the sandbox for you. Now, I see we have a number of chat questions. I don't know if there's anything I need to handle right now. Dave, are you answering them?
I've answered most, but I can summarize.
Okay.
One is, can you show using a previously uploaded file from the file manager?
Yeah.
So,
Whoops. Okay. So I'm going to create a new chat session here. I'm going to go to the file manager. Let's see if there's an old file that would be fun to use here. So I have an old Harvard sustainability report that's in a PDF that was previously used, and I'm going to use it right now. Let's see here. There we go. Okay, so not in the Managed Files window, but in the Attach Files window, I was able to scroll backwards in time using the previous and next buttons. I found the sustainability report. I clicked on it and it added it to the window, and now I can ask questions from it. Tell me about electrical consumption at Harvard. So it reads in the old file again into the context, and then we'll pose basic answers to it. So that's reusing old files from the file manager. You can also use the manage files to delete old files. Like I've got now six pages worth of files. At some point, I'm going to need to clean those up just for good hygiene, and also to make sure I'm not getting confused on multiple versions of documents. So if there aren't any other demo requests, I'm going to
We
actually.
had one more, I think.
Okay.
We have prompt sharing enabled, correct? There's an example in the chat if you want to try clicking on it. About 4 messages up from the bottom. In the Zoom chat, sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay, so there's sharing chats. Sharing chats, I don't think is quite the same thing as sharing the prompts themselves. But once you use the prompt, you could then share the chat with another user. But like sharing the prompt library itself, or like an entry in the prompt library, I don't think is a feature that we have at this time. Yeah, that's correct. Okay, just a moment. Okay, so everything that we've shown so far is what's currently available in the sandbox that we've released over the course of the last year since we released the new version of the sandbox. I'd like to talk a little bit about what's next. So good news is we've already made some good progress against the sandbox roadmap that we created a couple of months ago. Artifacts is now available, and I just demoed that for you a short while ago. The next big thing that we plan on releasing over the course of the summer is internet search. All of the questions and or all of the answers that we saw in the sandbox came from two methods. One is the knowledge base that the LLM itself has. It's like sort of like the training data that went into ChatGPT 4.1 or Claude 4 or some of the other models. Then we also gave it information with a file that's using file or retrieval augmented generation to provide more information to the LLM. The third way to add information to an LLM or to an AI application is through internet search. So if you want to ask a question that is immediate and perhaps based upon today's information or more recent than what the LLM knows, soon you'll be able to do internet searches directly from the sandbox. A great example of that I won't demo right now is if I were to ask GPT-4o who the current president of Harvard University is, it would probably say President Claudine Gay based upon the knowledge cutoff for GPT-4o. But if I were to use the internet search, it would go and do that search on the internet right now and pull back the correct answer of Alan Garber. And I think we'll probably see a little bit more of that in GPT-4 in just a moment. Other things that we plan on hoping to release a little bit more distant in the future, based upon when it becomes available in LibreChat, is deep research, which is the ability to submit a request for a more detailed research and report. It will go off and might take 10, 15 minutes, search a whole bunch of internet sources or sources on the internet, compile a detailed analysis and report, and present it back to you. ChatGPT and Anthropic Claude Desktop have those deep research features today. The Sandbox will have later in 2026. We also hope to make available what we call personal agents, and that's the joining together of a generative AI model with tools and tasks that go and can do things for you. Better work with files or database retrievals or search on the internet for things like weather or for shopping. Those are all different versions of what's called an AI agent. Well, the Sandbox, we hope to have some type of version of an agent available later in the year for the Sandbox for you, as well as improvements to the code interpreter. Let's see. And I think that's it for me. I'm going to stop sharing and Dave's going to take over.
Alrighty, thank you. Let me just share. Okay, great. And just to answer some of the questions, or one of the questions I see remaining, let's see. Actually, you know what? There's way too many at this point. I'll turn that over to Jefferson while I present. So just by a quick show of hands, how many folks use ChatGPT already in your day-to-day? Okay, a few. So, as Jefferson mentioned when he went through both tools, they are both extremely competent, best of class tools, and we provide AI Sandbox to the entire, or at least the entire Harvard community is eligible. And where necessary, ChatGPT has been employed in different schools for different populations. There's a few key differences in the feature set. One is the collaborative nature. So as Jefferson mentioned, much of what you do in the sandbox is on your own. You can share chats, but it's not really a collaborative experience. You're sort of sharing the output of a useful or interesting conversation you had with a large language model. It's read only. The person can continue it, but they can't really change it. It's not a co-editing sort of thing. One of the other major benefits right now is internet search that is implemented in ChatGPT EDU, and as Jefferson mentioned, is coming soon in the AI Sandbox. Another feature before I jump in to a demo are the apps. So the AI Sandbox, it has a responsive web interface, so it works, I'd say, very well on mobile platforms. We do have text-to-speech, which works, but there are a few really interesting features that ChatGPT has in that space. One is advanced voice mode, which you may have used, and if you haven't and you use ChatGPT, I really suggest you try it. It's a pretty compelling experience, where if you click the icon down in the chat bar, you can begin talking to ChatGPT. And it's not a sort of a simple transcription where you say a sentence, it pauses and converts it to text and sends it. It's truly conversational, where you can talk to the LLM like a person, you can interrupt them, and really go back and forth in near real time. There's no latency or delay. It's a pretty interesting experience on both Android and the iOS app. You can also do it on the desktop app and in the web interface. I typically find myself using it on walks or driving out to pick up my son, at school. In the car, it works really well. Another feature that is in some of the native applications, one feature is called Works with Apps. So if you're on Mac OS, the native ChatGPT application can actually integrate with common editors and integrated development environments. So it can make things like writing and coding a little more seamless, less of the cutting and pasting that you probably do if you use ChatGPT for any sort of creative processes. Cutting and pasting can be really challenging, or at least annoying. So it takes some of that away and it's a little more seamless. But yeah, I wanted to jump right in, and using ChatGPT sort of as the medium, talk about how, in general, we can work more efficiently and effectively with these tools. The first thing I want to cover is just the prompt at a very high level. And this is one framework. There are many frameworks out there. I actually pulled this from Ismael Carrera's presentations. He does a great job presenting to the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. You can find his content on the FAS AI site, which I believe is www.fas.harvard.edu/AI. His links are at the bottom of the page. But the first thing that's sort of core to the prompt is the task, right? It's what you want the large language model to do for you. And if you just ask it to perform a task, you may get the output you want, or you may not, because it doesn't know the context. It doesn't know precisely what you're looking for. So the more specificity we can add to that prompt, the better. The better the output you're going to get, the fewer times you're going to have to reprompt the model till you get exactly what you want. And we can start with a context or exemplars. So in the case of exemplars, if you know what your output should look like, if you're working with data and you want it to transform it into a new format, or you have a known good output that you want it to model its output on, provide it to the model, and it can use that to really improve what it provides to you without having to sort of hunt in the dark, trying to figure out exactly what you want it to give it. Context. If you are presenting to senior leadership, let them know, and let the model know. I find that working with an LLM is a lot like working in a collaboration tool like Slack, except I'm talking to an LLM versus a person, and I tend to treat it that way. And if I'm going to be presenting to, in this case, a large community of folks, and some of my prompts will talk to this, I'll provide it that context so it can sort of tailor the output for exactly what I'd like. Likewise with format, if we're doing data transformations and you want it in, you know, comma separated value format, let it know. You want an Excel spreadsheet, you want a PDF, let it know. Persona, you know, how do you want it to respond? Do you want it to respond as a technical expert? There's a Reddit thread that's you know, explain like I'm a 5-year-old. Like, do you want a really complex topic explained to you in really basic terms so you can understand it? Tell it, and it'll provide the output you want. And finally, tone. If you're like extremely frustrated and you're writing an email and you're afraid that that tone is going to bleed through, pass it through the LLM, ask it to soften your tone, and it often does a really great job. Sometimes you have to tell it to avoid the emoticons, but all in all, it does a really great job. So sort of applying those concepts to some common prompts that I run. In this case, right, we have a summarization prompt. So I provide updates on my teams on a weekly basis, and I actually use a variation of this prompt every week. So in this case, my task is to summarize this list of updates. I collect a list of bulleted updates from my folks. I ask for it in paragraph form. So this is sort of a translation exercise from a set of bullets into paragraph form. This is my format, and it'll be of interest to senior leadership. So I ask it to sort of group them into high-level narratives that align with our strategy. This is going to be a combination of our tone and our persona. Likewise, and we'll be talking about this one in just a minute, but our task is to review and generate several visualizations that provide insights on a major incident report that I provided it. And the context is I want it to be useful for our team and our leadership. And I'm asking for useful insights and connections that it can distill. I don't just say analyze this report. Like, I'm looking for things that might not pop off the page to me that it's able to generate. And then finally, for those of you who might be in more technical roles, I find it's super helpful if you're compiling code, if you're working at a command line and you see cryptic error messages popping out. My first step now is typically to paste them into a chat window, and it can often get to the root cause very, very quickly and resolve the errors rather than having to spend minutes or hours debugging. A few more I'll just cover before we jump right into the demo, and I've actually got most of these scripted out. You know, the title of this presentation was AI generated, and I want to highlight this because rather, again, hunting around trying to find exactly the right answer once, AIs can generate 20 answers just as easily as they can generate one. So go in volume, right? Throw the spaghetti against the wall, see what sticks, and then refine from the answers that you like out of that that set. Continually refining until you get to something that's just perfect for your particular use case. And then finally, I have an image generation slide that we'll talk about here as well. A few others, which, you know what, I'm just going to pause there and I'm going to just step right into the demo because I have all these scripted out. So we're just going to step through a few quick demos. A few interface highlights I wanted to call out is that ChatGPT, as you may know, has a free offering. It has a personal plus offering. It has a few offerings in between for governments, for teams, for enterprises. We use ChatGPT EDU. And under that agreement, we've worked with OpenAI to secure data at levels 3 and below, as Jefferson mentioned. We also have increased rate limits. We have a few benefits that come with that. But the thing you should always look for is the Harvard shield in the upper right corner. That means you're using the correct account because you can use the same email for multiple accounts. You may have accidentally logged in with a personal email. Look for the shield. That means you're protected. Under the shield, you can view settings. I just want to highlight that you can at any time delete all of your chats. You can delete individual chats as you please. So we do have effectively an infinite retention on chats, but you can clear them at any time. You can also archive them, which preserves the chats, but kind of gets them out of the way of your interface so it doesn't clutter up your screen. You can log out of all your devices. We haven't yet gone live with connectors, but this is actually going to let us connect into Harvard resources like your calendar, your schedule, your files in Google right now, but also M365 and GitHub. So this is pending security review, a feature that I'm looking forward to, but it just came out like 2 weeks ago, so we're working through that. Memory. This is a feature that I have personally disabled, but you can turn on memory, and this is a way to allow ChatGPT to learn things about you, about your style, about anything that you chat with about it will be preserved beyond the life of your chats. So this can really help customize responses to your queries. But just be aware that memories are separate from chats, and memories that are learned from chats will live on even if you clear out your chats. So you can manage memory separately. You can delete them if it learns something that you'd prefer it not remember, or if it learns something that's incorrect, you can go into manage memories and clear those out. And you can customize the voice for advanced voice mode that it responds to you in. Just like you'll note that ChatGPT looks a lot like AI Sandbox. Unlike AI Sandbox, we are limited to OpenAI models. So you'll note that it defaults to GPT-4o, and like Jefferson mentioned, that is the default model, which is right for most people for most tasks. It's the model that I use for most tasks as well, but as I'll mention on a few more slides, you can step up to a more thoughtful but slower model if you'd like O3, O3 Pro, O4 Mini. These all have rate limits that were detailed on that matrix Jefferson presented up at the beginning of the presentation. And you can also use GPT-4.1 or 4.1 Mini. I would not use GPT-4.5, it's being deprecated, but GPT-4.1 is the default in the sandbox. So I don't expect you to understand what all these models are. Frankly, I don't think many of us do either. It's an alphabet soup of models, and we have some actual metrics that we'll talk about as to when to choose which model for which task. But I think that the advice that I would give to everyone, and I use myself, is just stick with the default model. It's a default for a reason, and unless you have reason to change it, there isn't any reason to really worry yourself with that. Okay, so stepping through some of the chats I've saved, I wanted to highlight this. There's a difference between knowledge cutoff, which is when a model is trained. It's trained essentially on the internet, and it's trained on that internet at a particular point in time. So for all of the most recent OpenAI models, that is the end of May 2024. And note, I've asked this question of ChatGPT: who is the US president? Do not search the web. We've had users tripped up by this, and I even it's challenging to know, because often the ChatGPT tool will automatically kick in and search the web for you. It will almost always do this appropriately. Sometimes it does not. Actually, when I was preparing for our IT Summit presentation, it did not, and it came back with Joe Biden being the president. So in this case, I just follow up and I ask, who is the president? And it was able to know that, okay, this is sort of a timely question that I need more recent information for. It went out and it searched and pulled a different answer. So I want to show here that you can pick the tool you want to use from this tool menu. ChatGPT is smart enough in almost all cases to know that you're writing or using code. It can detect what the code looks like and spawn an interface similar to that artifacts interface that Jefferson showed, but it's called Canvas. It can search the web to answer your question. It will generate an image. You just have to ask it to. It will sometimes kick off deep research, which is a more involved tool that you only get 10 runs per month. So it is a very long running tool. It can take minutes, many minutes to run. As you can see, I've got 23 left. So I'm sorry, maybe they've increased that. But it's a very finite resource. So use them sparingly if you're using deep research, but they can provide really useful results if you're looking for depth versus speed. Here we have image creation. I just wanted to, this is the very prompt that was on the slide. So I asked for a slide that would work well in a presentation on well, this presentation. So please playfully integrate imagery of innovation and productivity along with collegiate and AI-related imageries. Please use a subdued color palette and a pure white background. Do not include text. And you can see it's mostly there, right? Eggshell isn't pure white, but it didn't use text. And there's definitely elements of AI and collegiate elements. So I've just asked to refine it, please use a white background, and it did it. In my experience, the image generation, it's gotten much better with some of the new models. So these are models right now that are sort of specific to ChatGPT EDU. It's much better at following direction. You may find if you're using the Sandbox that you have to ask quite a few times to get the image just where you want it. It's using an older DALL-E 3 model, where this is using a GPT Image 1 model. Those details don't matter, just that ChatGPT is a bit ahead right now on the image generation. In terms of
Dave, before you move on, there was a question in chat that's timely about image creation.
Sure.
Will the new image generation create alt text for the images?
That is a great question. I don't know.
It will if you prompt it to, if you ask it to. We had a colleague in our marketing and communications team who actually built a custom GPT around generating alt text.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I believe, too, this might follow up on one of the previous questions in the chat. I believe the GPT Image 1 model can also edit images versus just generate. For those of you who haven't done it before, it also takes a while, so I'm going to just move on. A common task might be data transformation. So this is contrived, super simple, but just to illustrate the point, I've uploaded a CSV file, which has last names and first names in 2 separate columns. And I've asked it to merge the first and last names into a single field of the form first and last name. So I've asked it to merge them, but also swap them. And you can see it thought for a few seconds about it, and you can actually expand that in ChatGPT to see what it was thinking. You can actually see it creating the tools in Python that it executes to generate the merged output here. One tip that I'll talk about in a coming slide is have it show you how to do it rather than do it itself. So particularly if this was not 200 lines of contrived text, you're dealing with thousands of entries, you might want some way to validate that it did what you wanted, because sometimes, frankly, things fall through the cracks with an LLM. So rather than asking it to do the merge, I've asked it to follow up with, can you provide me a simple Python script to generate this output from a CSV file? So that's something I could execute locally if I liked. But if I wasn't technically familiar with Python, I've asked for an Excel macro to do the same thing. And you can see down here, it did indeed generate a Visual Basic macro. But I also asked it, because I actually just used the wrong word, so can you also create an Excel formula? So it creates a very, very simple formula for you to do this in Excel, which is perfectly deterministic, and you can validate the output rather than just putting your trust into an LLM to do it properly, which it will do 95% of the time, but it's the 5% that gets you. So especially when it comes to data transformation and math, you want to be very specific to use code interpreter in the Sandbox, or specifically asking it to generate code and execute it for you in ChatGPT. Speaking of code, I've asked it to generate a Python script to translate the contents of a text file to Pig Latin. So it will go ahead and describe what it's about to do, and then generate the code in Python. But what if I don't want the code? I don't want to run this locally. I don't have this development environment set up. I've just asked it to execute it. So can you execute this code against the names of the 50 US states? And sure enough, it does. Alabama way. Is that right? That's not right, is it? Yeah, okay, I guess it is. Anyway, so there we go. There's the 50 states in Pig Latin. We're running a little short on time, so I want to leave room for questions. But a real world example, literally, I used this morning and it just happened to work out well. I generated a report out of our ServiceNow instance. So ServiceNow generates reports in PDF. I'm sure there's a way to export that data as CSV. I'm not familiar with it. So I generated a PDF of all of the MIs seen by Hewitt in the last 6 years. And I've asked it, as this is right off the slide, can you please review and generate several visualizations that provide insights that might be useful to our team and leadership, etc. So I've asked it for an analysis, and the first thing it's provided is a simple table of incidents by key service area, and network is in the lead, and I think 3 of those years I was leading the network team, so I'm sorry. But we've got a list of all of the incidents by team. We can see that in graph form here. It's grouping them by severity by year, which is super interesting. And then we've got total major incidents per year across those 6 years, where you'll notice the axis here is not wonderful, but if we were to highlight, you can see that's 2019, 2020, 2021, etc. So some really useful visualizations that came out of just uploading a PDF report. Now, I think you should definitely validate the output. I'll be quite honest that this wasn't the first time I ran through it. The first time wasn't nearly as impressive, but you want to just make sure you check your data set against what it's produced, particularly if it's like a PDF that might have text that's formatted, and sometimes it doesn't read it properly, but very, very often, and even more so now than a year ago, it does a wonderful job of reading structured data. Here's another one based on the data provided in the pedestrian CSV. What intersections are the most treacherous for pedestrians in Cambridge? And then map them. So I've uploaded a slightly modified version of some data from, this came from Emily Bottas. I think it came from Open Data for Cambridge. It basically does some categorization of the intersections and the number of crashes, and then it produces a really nice map of where those most treacherous intersections are. Kind of a mashup between different data sets, in this case, location and crash data. A few others that I use every day, context-aware thesaurus, really simple use case, but one that I use a lot. So rather than just Googling a word and asking for synonyms, right, I can provide the context. And in this case, the sky was an amazing shade of blue that stretched for miles. So give me another option besides amazing, and they're pretty good. Probably not the words that would pop up first on a simple Google. And then finally, along, I mentioned earlier that the title of this presentation was AI generated. So provide me a catchy title for a presentation about using ChatGPT EDU to bring small productivity efficiencies that lead to large productivity boosts. It provides some options, but going forward with the iteration concept, right? Give me 20 more and include the worst puns you can possibly think of. And it goes ahead and does that. I particularly like Saturday Night Efficiency Fever. So, right, we can just keep asking, we can keep iterating, we can give it, oh, I like this portion of the title, please give me 20 variations using this particular prefix on the title. Okay, so that's just a sort of a hodgepodge of use cases, many of which I use in my day-to-day, but just going back to the presentation and realizing that we are running short on time, I wanted to just quickly touch on model choice. This is a fairly in-depth slide. We can happy to talk offline, but I used AI to generate 5 questions about Harvard. You can see them in the bottom right here, going from a simple factual question, what city is Harvard located in, all the way up to a hypothetical question of, if I'm applying to Harvard, what are the top 3 things I should focus on in my application essay to stand out? And then I ran that through the OpenAI models. How many times did I run that? 20 times, and then I just took the average. So this is not scientific, but this is representative of my experience and likely your experience. And we have here GPT-4.1 being the standard model in the Sandbox. And I want to just highlight that it is it is one of the fastest models for most types of questions. GPT-4o mini is a much smaller model, so the quality of the responses will be worse. So just to highlight that for most folks, GPT-4o or GPT-4o, if you're using ChatGPT, is the default model. It is the best model. As you get to more advanced questions, you can see that they take longer to respond, and this will generate more robust, more in-depth responses. So if that's your goal, there might be a reason to toggle to a reasoning model, which is something like an O3 or an O4 mini. But just know it's going to take longer, and they are rate limited. So you're going to get, I think it's $300 a month for O4 mini, and I forget how many for O3. They're in the matrix at the beginning of this slide. If you're doing something very specific like coding, there are compelling reasons to use something like Anthropic Claude 4, to use Google's Gemini 2.5 Pro, or to use O3. So these are all reasoning models. They all take much longer to run than something like a GPT-4o or a 4.1, but they are really good at coding. So if you're a developer, I would recommend one of those models. Often it comes down to personal preference in terms of the coded outputs, but those three are the three to look at. And finally, if you're uploading large files into the context window, meaning you're dragging it into the ChatGPT window and saying, hey, analyze this for me, GPT-4o has a 1 million token context window. Tokens are how models read words. It's roughly 2 per word. So you can think of it more in terms of like books. And if you go into the Sandbox, we've actually done some work to sort of translate tokens into things that actually matter to us, which are like the number of words or the size of the data set you can upload. But you can see there's a big difference, right? 1 million for ChatGPT 4.1. In the AI Sandbox, it only has 32,000 in ChatGPT EDU. Claude 4 has 200,000. So in the AI Sandbox, we list all of these out. It's a little more opaque within ChatGPT EDU, but again, if you stick with the 4o model, you're probably okay for most things. And then finally, best practices. I kind of covered some of these in my examples, but treat the output of these models as input to your own creative process. Don't treat it as gospel. Second guess it. Ask questions like, are you sure? Very often, particularly when it comes to some of these data transformation exercises or a model doing math, if it doesn't look quite right, just ask it, are you sure about that? And very often it will just say, oh yeah, you're right, sorry. And it will just fix the output for you. I ran into an issue here where I was generating some data and it came out 10x off, an order of magnitude off where it was supposed to be, and just didn't look right. So I just asked it, are you sure? This was after wasting about a half hour trying to find my errors, but it was like, oh yeah, that was a mistake, and it corrected the output. So these are models that are trained on human data. They make mistakes, particularly when it comes to math, so don't be afraid to second guess the machine. Show, not do. Particularly when you're working with large data sets, I really recommend that you ask the tool not to do whatever it is, the task that you want it to do. Ask how you can do the task. So ask for an Excel macro or an Excel formula, or ask for it to output the workflow in your particular tool of choice so that you can go ahead and do things in a deterministic way so that you can kind of see step by step that the data is being preserved and transformed as you'd like, rather than just trusting the machine to take an input and then output it properly. Generate in quantity and iterate. And then if you're stuck, try reasoning mode. And this goes back to the default model. The default model is default for a reason. It's probably the one you want, but particularly if you're coding or you're doing in-depth reasoning, you can get caught in these logical loops where there may be an error and you ask it to fix the error and it introduces error 2, and you ask it to fix error 2 and it produces error 1, and you get caught in a loop. Toggling to a reasoning model like O3 or O4 mini can sort of clear a hurdle so that you can keep moving on. It can often just do it immediately, and then you can revert back to your other model and continue on. But doing that sooner than later very often might save you some headaches and heartaches as you prompt the model. And I think that's it. I will stop sharing I know there's probably a lot of questions in the chat. I don't know, Jefferson, do you want to raise any questions?
I think I've done a pretty decent job of staying on top of the questions. Jacob just posed one a moment ago that I haven't gotten to yet. Have you run into scenarios where the LLM will just agree with you when you push back, even if you're wrong?
So there was an issue with ChatGPT models in particular a few weeks back of syncophy, where it was just agreeing with everything and telling you how awesome you were, and potentially leading to some really dark places. Like it was a real bug that OpenAI had to resolve. But I'd ask for folks to comment in the chat and get Jefferson's take as well. But my take is that the models in general are overly supportive of whatever you tell them. So sometimes framing your question negatively, like tell me what's wrong with this, rather than how is this okay? Ask like what's wrong with this? It provides more sort of latitude for the model to give you more constructive feedback rather than just agreeing.
Even asking questions like, "Are you sure?" will sometimes prompt the LLM to actually go back and take a second look and will sometimes provide a different answer based upon it catching its own error or correcting a problem, especially when dealing with more analytical or programming related questions. It's actually pretty decent at doing at a second pass analysis. Let's see. Seth asks, what's one misconception or wrong bit of advice you often see shared that you'd like to correct or guide folks against doing?
It's a great question. One thing I'll note is that prompt engineering is less important than it was in the past. That asking the question precisely doesn't matter as much as it once did. Even if it's an incomplete sentences with typos, you can just roughly be in the right ballpark, and it knows it will figure out what you're talking about. And I think that's just improved training. But at the end of the day, there is some element of truth to it. It's just less important because at the end of the day, these models are trained on like petabytes of human data. So it's got all of the same issues and biases and problems that data would have.
This isn't so much a misconception as it is a point in time comment. And that is, I sometimes hear that never use AI because it always hallucinates. I will never use AI in the future because it always hallucinates. And certainly there are plenty of fantastic examples of hallucination in the past, in the present, and will continue to be in the future. But one thing I would note, especially in a academic setting or in an administrative setting, is that with the rise of AI assistants and agents, the ability for these LLMs, these AI applications to interact with real-time data and actually pull real-time data and integrate it into its replies will start obviating some of the concerns around hallucination, where data and responses to AI questions won't always just come from the LLM pre-trained information. It will be increasingly coming from real-time sources, and therefore the propensity for hallucination when done right, will hopefully start decreasing. So it's yes, be cautious about hallucinations now, be cautious about hallucinations in the future, but that risk is going to be changing over time as we're able to integrate a wider variety of real-time data sources.
And I think we're at time, so I'll turn it back to Deirdre.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Jefferson. And thank you all for your great engagement and all your questions. We will be sharing the recording and the slides once posted to our website. So stay tuned for that. But in the interim, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Thank you all.